Okay. I'm going to throw some things out there and let you guys respond to them as you will. And let me say, a lot of people think I'm stupid, and I'm not. I'm ignorant. Ignorant means you can learn, right, Dennis?
We're all ignorant.
And I learned something tonight from you, so I guess it's been a good day. So I am going to cite the source of this idea.
That's right.
This idea came from one of my dear friends, Ronnie Brassfield, who I call Chicken Man. Ronnie works with me every Tuesday morning leading a Bible study for homeless guys downtown at the Atlanta Mission. The choice for us morally, it's never between good and bad. I think Satan's, one of his greatest tools is it never looks bad. He makes it look good. And so, according to Ronnie, the choice every morning that we have is between best and good. Because the devil always makes it look good. With that in mind, what do you gentlemen think are some of the biggest lies that our culture tells us today?
Wow.
Good one.
I was worried about some of the things Jeff might say. I didn't worry about what my dear friend Dennis would say too. So it's great to have both of you here on the platform with me. You'll keep me balanced. I think I have a good illustration on that, Jeff. When Tiger Woods went the way of all flesh and made his horrendous mistakes, the media wanted to interview him. And in the most ironic question I've ever heard a media person ask, it was asked by a media person of Tiger Woods, how could you lie to so many for so long? Now, when that came from a journalist, I figured I'd heard it all at this point. How could you lie to so many for so long? And you know what Tiger Woods said? Because I first lied to myself. I would love to have had a follow-up question. My question would have been not to celebrate the sadness, not to celebrate the destruction. That ought never to be the posture of any human being when you see a person implode under the weight of fame or whatever. I would like to have asked Tiger Woods this question. What did you lie to yourself about? Did you lie to yourself that you would never get caught? Or did you lie to yourself about the fact that in doing what you did, that's wherein lay your happiness? See, that's the deadly lie. The lie that's superfluous is that I'll never get caught. But the real poisonous lie in the system is to think that you can violate the sacred boundaries that God has set, and that in that violation you will find your fulfillment and find your happiness. It's simply not true. You see, the fact of the matter is God has set boundaries. He has set for us those fences, and Chesterton once said, whenever you remove any fence, always pause long enough to ask why it was put there in the first place. You see, as an apologist, I'm asked what they think is the most dart-laden question, God and the problem of evil. Believe me, that is an easier question to answer than this one, because Chesterton said, meaninglessness does not come from being weary of pain. Meaninglessness comes from being weary of pleasure. So pleasure without God, without the sacred boundaries, will actually leave you emptier than before. And this is biblical truth. This is experiential truth. The loneliest people in the world are amongst the wealthiest and the most famous who found no boundaries within which to live. That is a fact I have seen again and again. So I would just identify that one, Jeff, the fact that pleasure is the way of ultimate fulfillment. Who would have ever thought that Oscar Wilde, who lived that hedonistic life, lying in his bed in Paris looks at his lover, Robbie Ross, and asks him the most incredible question: did you ever love any one of those boys for their own sake? What is a hedonist suddenly introducing a pristine definition of love? And when Robbie Ross said no, he said, neither did I. Only a priest now is all I need, because he went on to talk about how the blood of Christ was all that he needed ultimately to cleanse him in his Ballad of Reading Jail. The greatest lie we sometimes are told is that in pleasure lies our fulfillment. I would say pleasure unbounded by sacredness will leave you emptier than before.
We live actually in the age of lies, and they permeate everything, and I'll give it briefly in the political realm or historical realm, as well as the moral realm. I spend my life, in effect, battling lies. One lie is that America is a racist society. It's a lie. It's not an opinion. It's a lie. It's the least racist society ever created that we know of in history. And the vast majority of Americans don't care about a person's color, don't care about a person's national background. I was a member of the Rotary Club many years ago, and I saw it in real life. Nobody gave a hoot if the guy who was I was there when it was all male, and I think it was a good idea, because men need men to be better. And we live in the age of stupidity, so everything has to be co-ed. It is. It's stupid. It's just stupid. It's plain. There is no wisdom, and again, it's because people go to graduate school. And you're laughing. I mean it literally. I do believe you become less wise the more education you get at college and graduate school, unless it's geology. Geology does not undo your wisdom, but in the liberal arts they do. And the truth is, and I document this in my last book. I'm not trying to sell it to you, because I assume you already bought it. And but I document this. The president of the Republic of Georgia spoke about how only in America nobody gives a hoot. He said, I saw a bunch of people from Africa, he says at some tech company, from Africa, from Asia, from Latin America. Said they all looked American, talked American, acted American. Said nowhere else on the earth. This is a foreigner, a president of another country. Nowhere else in the earth does this matter. Does anybody here, or does any one of the millions touched by this man care whether he's from India or Georgia originally? It doesn't even occur to anybody. It doesn't occur. And look at this, you're 2,200 of you, and it's a Jew. The other person on the platform is a Jew. Does it bother anybody? I mean, there's no place like this place. So the lies told about America infuriate me, because I hate lies about the good. There are too few good, and to lie about it is the ultimate sin. The other great lie, and there are many, many of them, the other great lie is that we can do without God. That we could do morally without God, we could do happiness without God, we could have meaning without God. And in that course of that lie is this one, again, that I have heard every time I ever raise the issue for 31 years on my radio show. Oh, well, you know, Dennis, more people have been killed by religion in the name of God than anything else. And I said, well, I'm just curious. What was the most genocidal century of which we have any record? The 20th, correct? Where we're talking about 100 million people at least. Civilians, not soldiers, not soldiers. Just 65 million civilians alone in China that nobody bothers to talk about. Every single one committed by a secular state. Every single one. You won't learn that at the University of Georgia or of Minnesota or UCLA or Harvard. You will never be told that truth, that secular governments have slaughtered and enslaved more than any religion. But it's a lie. And we live in a world of lies, and that's high and chief among them.
You know, we stand here looking at the condition of the country, and it's very easy to say, well, we show up on a Thursday night and we care about these things, but, you know, my thought always is, how did we get here? So here's my question. Have we as religious people contributed in any way to the decline of the Western culture?
I'll let Ravi off the hook. I'll take it first then. I felt bad that you gave it to give him the chance to, like I had this great chance to think up stuff while he talked. And I admit it, you know, I cheated a little bit on that one, you know. So yes, religious people, of course religious people contribute. First of all, here's a great question. I love asking pastors, priests, rabbis, and anyone who thinks about religion. What's the greatest sin in your religion? It's a fascinating question, and I've gotten any number of answers. And I know from my religion, you could wake up a traditional rabbi at 3 a.m. and say, Rabbi, what's the greatest sin in Judaism? And he'll give you the same answer. And that is doing evil in God's name. That's the greatest sin according to Judaism because, and by the way, that is what do not take God's name in vain really is. I know from the Hebrew, and I know Torah Hebrew like I know English. The Torah Hebrew is mistranslated when it says, do not take the Lord's name in vain. And I'll prove it to you and just end with that because it's so important. I'm on a crusade, if you will, to give the correct, what I believe is the correct explanation of that commandment. Because it says to prove to you that it can't mean, and this is the way most people understand it. If I say, oh my God, did you see that home run? Then a lot of religious people will say, you know, you took God's name in vain, you violated the commandment. But it's not true. First of all, God is not God's name, but even aside from that. No, that's not insignificant. And I tell this to my Orthodox Jewish friends who spell God G-D, and I go, why are you doing that? God isn't God's name. But okay, be that as it may, here is the proof that it can't be that. It is the only sin in the Ten Commandments that God says he will not forgive. He's going to forgive murder, theft, adultery, lying in court. He'll forgive, but not saying, oh my God, what a home run. This is a very, very silly God, in my opinion, and I am convinced God is not silly. That's one of my basic beliefs. In fact, I know, but I already have a title for a book I never wrote, but which would really annoy a lot of religious people. It would be titled, God Has Common Sense. Because religious people often portray him as not having common sense, and in my opinion, that's one of them. God will forgive everything except saying, oh my God, what a great piano recital. You took his name in vain. So it can't be that. It can't possibly be that. So what is the Hebrew? The Hebrew is lo tisa et shem Adonai Elohecha lashav. Do not, it's not take. The Hebrew, and ask anyone who knows Hebrew, is do not carry God's name in vain. Big difference. Totally different. It's been mistranslated. Do not carry God's name in vain is one who murders in the name of God, steals in the name of God, molests children in the name of God. These are the scum of the earth, the worst people on earth. If an atheist commits torture and a religious person commits torture, it's actually worse if a person tortures in the name of God than if an atheist tortures. Because the atheist has done pure evil, but has not ruined the possibility of people taking God seriously. Whereas the person who, the Islamist who murders in the name of God, I'm telling you, there is a direct relationship between all the murder in God's name taking place in our time and the ascent of atheism. There is no question in my mind that they are related, because nobody does the case for atheism like the person who does evil in God's name. And nobody makes the case for God as beautifully as the one who does beautiful things in God's name.
Just add a excuse me, a footnote to that. When you take the 613 laws of Moses and take them through David's summary of it, Isaiah's further summary of it, and Micah's to do justice, to love mercy, and to walk humbly before your God, they're taking the essence out of all of that. I find it very fascinating that when Jesus was asked, what is the greatest law? He did not answer it as one. He said, to love the Lord your God with all your heart and all your mind and all your strength and all your soul, and to love your neighbor as yourself. On these two hang all of the laws and the prophets. You see, because of the first, the second necessarily follows. Without the first, you've got that cut flower civilization all over again, not rooted at all. When Jacob and Esau met up, Jacob had played the deceiver, the duplicitous guy, and he'd been on the run. And then he's on his way back, and he's wrestling before God, and he says, I'm not going to let you go unless you bless me. What is it that God says to him? What is your name? What is your name? As if God didn't know. God knew. But when he stole the blessing, he pretended to be somebody he was not. Now he's got an all-see, because he was kneeling in front of a blind father. Now he's got an all-seeing God who's asking what his name is. And he said, my name is Jacob. God says, because you have admitted who you are, I will make a great nation out of you. Jacob is coming back, and the man he'd betrayed, Esau, do you know what he says to him? I see in your face the face of God. If you and I saw in our fellow human beings that reflection of somebody created in the image of God, how dare I violate that human being? This uniquely Judeo-Christian truth is sublime, that the image of God in every man, in every woman. No, we're not God. There's a Hindi song that says, Na main Bhagwan hu, na main shaitan hu, duniya jo chahe samjhe, main to insan hu. I'm not God. I'm not Satan. You may think what you will. I'm merely a human being. But he doesn't go on to describe what it means to be human. What it means to be human is to be created in the image of God. I cannot violate you. The 10 Commandments can be summarized in one word: sacred. Your life is sacred. Your marriage is sacred. Your property is sacred. Your time is sacred. Your worship is sacred. And so is that of your neighbor, by right to the sacredness of his marriage and his home. I want to give you an incredible one-line illustration of this. And by the way, if you have not read Dennis's exchange with Sam Harris, I urge you to somehow get it. It was brilliant, Dennis.
Oh, thank you.
I think he just stumbled his way through and didn't know how to get through it. But the basic idea that Dennis was driving at, again, was how do you really anchor morality? I have been to the home of Mahatma Gandhi, who is considered the great freedom fighter through nonviolence in India. He always carried the Bible with him and quoted repeatedly from the Sermon on the Mount. In Mahatma Gandhi's home, I have seen a banner with my own eyes. It is an incredible statement. Here's what it says. It's the words of Bertrand Russell, who was an atheist. Here's what Russell says. It is doubtful that the Mahatma would have succeeded except that he was appealing to the conscience of a Christianized people. So here is an atheist commending a pantheist for succeeding because of the theist. What more do you want to hear? That's really the bottom line, yeah.
Man, this is going way too fast, and we do want to open this up because I have so many questions. I don't know which one to pick. Yeah, I read. I'm going to give a shameless plug. I don't even know who wrote it, but so I'm trying to cite the source. But I have a devotional.
Thank you so much.
Called Jesus Calling, and there was a thing in there this morning. I love this little thing because it's made for simple people like me. It's not, I read my utmost for his highest, and I'm drowning before the third line. But it said this morning that anxiety is contemplating your future without putting God in it. And I thought, man, that's never heard anxiety described that way. I kind of chewed on that all day. So we're here tonight because we care about these things. With it looking so bleak, where is the encouragement? Where is the hope? I mean, is this a runaway train going over the edge of the cliff, or is there hope?
Great question, and I'll be happy to take that. And Dennis, from his radio program, I'm sure. Am I wired still? Can you hear me? I can only speak from the experiences we have at open forums. It was, I was just telling an audience earlier on this evening of the sequence of meetings I've just come through in the last 4 or 5 days. I'm really looking forward to Thanksgiving because I'll be very thankful that Thanksgiving is there. After that, I don't travel to speak anymore for the rest of the year. But till then, it'll be 240 days on the road this year. It's incredible. The last 4 or 5 weeks, I was at Camp Gitmo at Guantanamo Bay, spoke there to the leadership of the base, then went on to Toronto to 5 cities in India. India came back earlier on this week, or latter part of last week, did an open forum at Dartmouth. And I was talking to Dennis on his show with this. Every university we go to, every university, you can take your pick. Whether it's Princeton, whether it's Cornell, whether it's Dartmouth, coming up Johns Hopkins, we've done UCLA this year, there's never a vacant seat in the auditorium, no matter how big an auditorium it is. UCLA, we had 2,500 in attendance. Dartmouth, every seat taken in the Spalding Auditorium, they said for the first time in its history for a religious event, was Dartmouth completely packed that. I was telling Dennis last year we did an open forum at Yale. Overflow crowd. There were buses of students that had come. One busload of Russian students had come from another campus. They were sitting in the aisles. And one of the members of the trustees of Yale happened to be sitting next to a friend of mine. And he looked at that friend of mine and he said, I don't understand this. He said, this is a Thursday night. He said, we have Tony Blair here. We have others here. We never fill this place up because anybody who's anybody comes here. We don't fill these auditoriums. What on earth are they coming here on a Thursday night to listen to talk on a religious thing? And my talk that night was the defense of the Christian faith, clearly announced. And my friend leaned over to the trustee and said, is it possible you have left their souls empty? Mm. I'm telling you, we were in India at the first medical school built there, historic. They had to open an overflow room with 1,000 sitting in there. This is a predominantly Hindu culture. People are eager to listen if you will present the truth to them with identification, identify with the audience, translation in an understandable way, persuasion, what is it you're really using to persuade them with, and justification, why it is true. If you do it undergirded by courtesy and grace, and I'll just end with this, Dennis can have to, and why do I listen to a man like him, frankly? I'm not just saying it because he's here, my wife's in the front row, we do this regularly, because he has the knowledge of what he's talking about, and the courtesy with which he addresses counter-perspective. I'm not looking for another fight when I'm driving to work or driving. I've had enough of it for the day. I really want to go to bed without fighting in my mind somebody on a talk show. But when one is articulating profound issues with relevance and with courtesy, you're willing to listen. At the end of the Dartmouth evening, a young 17-year-old who has applied to Dartmouth, not even there, she came up to the front, and here's exactly what she said. I want to tell you, I came in here as a skeptic, but I'm beginning to think seriously of what was said tonight because of the manner in which you answered the questions of the audience here this evening. The courtesy and the grace, truth that is not undergirded by love, makes the truth obnoxious and the possessor of it repulsive. You must take it with love and grace. And so I tell you, Jeff, you know, he always jokes about his intellectual prowess or whatever it is. This man's a genius. He's a genius. Because the world is heavy-hearted, and when you can give somebody a clean and a healthy laugh, you send them away probably closer to be able to listen to the truth, because the closer you are to goodness, the closer you get to the voice of God. And I just say, in the work he does, work Dennis is doing, work I'm doing, there are people who are willing to listen. There is hope, and the best reason for that hope is our young people, who I believe once they come under the conviction of the truth, they'll put the bag on their back, and they'll go to the hinterland anywhere in the world, and they will take the gospel message or whatever it is they are carrying in terms of a peaceable coexistence for life. I've seen them in some of the most troubled parts of the world. So I say to you, don't underestimate the hunger and the genuine seeking heart of our young people. As a Christian apologist, I take to them the message of Christ. Tell them to take that message to the world, how to love the Lord your God with all your heart and to love your neighbor as yourself. After 41 years of doing this, even though I believe we are living in dark days, every now and then I see a light shining somewhere, and I have hope for the future, that all it will take is one great person articulating it in a way that will turn history around. And I think and I pray we will live to see that day.
So whenever I am asked about is there hope, I am reminded of one of the greatest lines that I've ever heard. When I was in my 20s, I had a mentor. His name was Rabbi Pinchas Peli. He was an Israeli rabbi, and he took a liking to me. And I lived at his home when I went to Israel, which was every year in my 20s. And he told me this story. In the early days of Israel, when it was a much more socialistic type country, the place was run by bureaucrats. So it took you 6 months to get your telephone for your house. So he told me the story that he went to the Ministry of Telecommunications to get his phone. And he then said to the guy, and obviously I'm translating, but it works happily, perfectly in English. And he said to the guy, he said, so is there any chance that I can get this phone sooner than 6 months? And the man looked at him and said, sir, there's always chance. There's no hope. So it's terrible, because whenever I'm asked, is there any hope, that's what comes to mind. There's no chance, but there's always hope. So I have to get it out of my brain, but it's too good a line. I can't get it out of my brain. So, is there hope and so on? I don't know. I don't work under the, I don't do my work under the impression that there is hope or chance or anything like that. I do my work because that's what God wants me to do. End of issue. I don't know what the chances are of its success. I don't even think much about it. I have a very, very simple relationship with God. Maybe it's too simple, because it's not a terribly emotional one, which it's just the way it is. I made peace with that. My biggest question it's 99% of my relationship is, what do you want me to do? The other 1% is, all the other stuff. I don't ask him for much. I hope he will do things. But I really want to know, what do you want me to do? And this is my task. If I'm given health and I'm given ability, then I have to do what's right. I tell Jewish audiences that we Jews have become like Jonah, running away from our mission. Jonah is, to me, the classic book in that way. And believe me, many Christians fulfill that title as well. Jonah's not just Jewish. And so that's the issue. Are you going to be Jonah? Are you going to run away from, if you don't believe in God, it doesn't apply. But if you do believe in God, then you have a task. You have a task on this earth. You have to bring God's word to the world. Now, I'm perfectly happy with love God and love your fellow man. My favorite, you quoted, in fact. Hey, hello, man. He doesn't even, it's fascinating. He says, Adam. That's truly generic human being. Hey, man, hasn't I told you what I want, what God wants? To love justice, act mercifully, and walk humbly with your God? Okay, it's not complex. It isn't complex. We make it complex. It isn't. That's what he wants. And that's it. That's how I think. So I don't measure each day. I don't take the temperature of the country in that way. I don't know. Things happen that are utterly shocking. On a purely non-religious basis, looking just as if you will, with my secular brain at the country, I'm worried terribly. I'm worried. Everything is working against what we're talking about tonight. Everything, especially education. I mean, they just did and I'm not saying this because I'm Jewish. I mean, this would bother anybody. I mean, they just did a survey. They walked around campuses and asked kids, what is the Holocaust? And they didn't know. They don't know who the vice president is. You can graduate summa cum laude from a prestigious university and know nothing. Know an incredible amount about very, very little, not to mention the lack of wisdom. It is no joke when I say on my show, if somebody says to me something particularly stupid, but they said it with proper grammar, then I immediately assume the following. What graduate school did you attend? No, I do that on the air all the time. And then they go, hey, how'd you know I went to graduate school? And then, then I'm stuck because I don't want to insult them. So I try to say, look, I don't mean to insult you, but you had to go to graduate school to say something that foolish. You could not come up with that on your own. You have to go to college to believe men and women are basically the same. My grandmother, who never went to any school, knew more about men and women than a PhD in women's studies. So it's bad. I mean, the chaotic forces, if you will, have taken over education. When a kid calls my show, kid 15 years old, 11 years old, calls my show and asks a serious question, I immediately assume they're homeschooled. And I say that, are you homeschooled? And then they go, how do you know? I say, because only a homeschooled kid is likely to call in about the issue of good and evil. Right? The average 11-year-old is thinking about the Miley Cyrus, unfortunately. So it's tough to say that there's optimism. By the way, something that does give me hope, though, I want to read this because are the members of the House, the Georgia House of Representatives, still present here? Are you four here? I'd like to introduce them. This is a big deal. They're very busy. They had to travel a while to get out here. So first, these are four members of your House of Representatives, and I'm honored that they came. First, my good friend Sam Teasley, Representative Sam Teasley. Representative Brockway, Buzz Brockway. That was too humble. That was too humble. Stand up the whole way. Thank you, thank you. I don't like humility. Josh Clark. And Timothy Barr. No, I'm not kidding. That's a reason for hope. So there are glimmers. That's right. You deserve it. You know, he inspires me. See, we need each other, and I mean this quite sincerely, because it's lonely out there. You know, unless you live in a hermetically sealed world, and some people do, it's tough out there. It's tough for you out there. You're not living in nunneries or in monasteries. You're living out there in the world, and where people have been told that people of faith are stupid. It's one of their favorite admonitions. We're stupid. So I always ask them, really? So tell me, who are the brilliant secular writers that people read? Where are they? We're stupid. It's all ad hominem attacks. And so I know how you feel. He knows how you feel. It's important that you know that. You give me strength. You give him strength. We do strengthen each other. And I know that. And it's a good thing. That's why we need each other. I hate to say people who need people are the luckiest people in the world, because the person who popularized it is not my favorite thinker. But it's true. And we know that we need each other. So there is reason for hope and even a chance.
By the way, and I didn't welcome you to the South because people that are Southerners, we try to be humble about it. But when you were going through your thing where the translation was incorrect about the take and the carry, people up north say, will you take me to the store? People down south say, will you carry me to the store? So. For the record, we got it right.
That was great. That was just great.
I think at this point we are opening the floor to questions, and I'm not quite sure how we do this. If I walk down with a microphone, you have microphones at either side, or I can just walk down. I like people a lot, so do we have a line? People that want to ask a question? You're coming. Come on. How are you? What's your name?
My name's Daniel Phelan.
And your question, Daniel?
I have one question. It's for Ravi Zacharias. Sir, I love you, man. Like, when Jesus saved my life in college, I was faced with so many questions. And the courage and the boldness that you have through sharing your faith has encouraged me that when I'm sharing my gospel and the gospel with people, they're looking at me and they're saying, man, where do you get these answers? I'm like, dude, you need to hear Ravi Zacharias. He's sick. So I have one question for you, and this may not be conventional, but sir, I would love to give you a hug. Can I give you a hug?
That was beautiful. That was beautiful.
How are you? What's your name?
Tom Robinson.
And your question?
I'm really sick and tired of the science versus religion comments. I heard Dawkins on the radio a couple of weeks ago saying, my belief is based on evidence. Well, we all have evidence. We all have the same evidence. And I think the issue isn't science versus religion. The issue is science and origins. And if we could separate the two, and this is where I want your comment, if we can separate those two, then we get evolution out of science, because it doesn't belong there. It's their religion, it's their belief structure, and now we can all focus on God's beautiful science. So your comments.
Yeah, if I may comment on that. First of all, you should all take a look. It's on the internet. It's easily found, Prager's response to Dawkins. He's the only one of the major atheists who's refused to come on my show. And I noted that after listing all the major atheists who have, and in my original version, which I did not send in, I wrote, I don't blame him. But I did not send that in, and that sounds arrogant. And so, but I don't blame him, because he's an intellectual lightweight. He's total intellectual lightweight. It's that his arguments go for intellectual and deep shows you the shallowness of the secular university. He is living proof of the intellectual shallowness of the university. I have nothing to say about his knowledge of biology, nothing. I am sure he is an expert in that arena. But in terms of his argumentation, it is so flawed and so simplistic and so intellectually dishonest, it takes your breath away. He was asked by, I think actually it turns out, I don't know, a Pakistani student in England. It's on YouTube. He was asked exactly this question. If there's no God, there's no good and evil and so on. And you know what his answer was? Look at all the religious people who've committed evil. It's a non sequitur. Excuse me. It has nothing to do with the question. Of course there were religious evil people. Of course there were good atheists. That's not the question. The question is there an objective good and evil if there is no God? He doesn't answer that. He can't answer that. He's not interested in evidence. And I'll give you the proof about science and evidence. Our scientists, atheist scientists and evidence, how it is willed. It is not a result of science, and it is not a result of evidence. The book that you should all read, and it's very brief, is God and the Astronomers by Robert Jastrow. Robert Jastrow was the head of the Goddard Space Center at NASA. He was one of the country's leading astronomers and an agnostic. I knew him very well. For some reason, we got quite friendly. And he was as good a human being as he was a scientist. He died far too young. In any event, this is the thesis of his book. He said something happened, and it was originally a New York Times Magazine article, which was stunning that the New York Times had published it. And it was this. He said, I'm seeing something among my fellow astronomers that is completely non-scientific. The Big Bang is now generally recognized as the scientific explanation that there was a beginning to the universe. And I can't believe how many of my scientist friends, colleagues, are upset. He said, evidence should never upset a scientist. Correct? Then he's not a scientist, is he? And why were they upset? Because beginning raises an unanswerable question to the atheist. How did it start? Until the Big Bang, science and atheists would say, well, you say God is eternal, we say matter is eternal. But hey, it isn't. It started. And this really bugged his fellow astronomers. And he said, I came to realize maybe they are rooting for evidence and not listening to evidence. That's why that's such an important book. So don't ever, ever be misled by the Dawkinses or the scientists who tell you, oh, we just look at evidence. Because if you give them evidence for design, they'll say, no, science can never, ever argue for design. Well, why? If there's evidence should argue for anything. If evidence argued for Martians having made man, then it would argue for Martians making man. So it's a fraud. It is not true that they go where the evidence lies. They go where the evidence serves their atheism.
I don't know how many of you are familiar with that interview that Dawkins had with the dean of St. Paul's it was taped, so it was on the air live. Dawkins was once again mocking Christians and so on. You know, he's really an intellectual coward. When he was in Washington, they asked him, how should we respond to religious people? And he said, just mock them, just ridicule them,
That's right.
just mock them. So somebody at a university open forum asked me what I thought of that. I said, I agree with him, and I suggest he start off in Saudi Arabia. I said he won't need a round-trip ticket, just one way is all he will need. You know. But Dawkins was on a radio program on the BBC live when he's debating the dean, and he's making fun of Christians, and most of them can't name the Gospels. And so the dean says to him, Richard, your Bible is The Origin of Species, right? He said, that's right. He said, can you name the full title? Dawkins says, yeah, I know it's a longer title than Origin of Species. He says, go ahead, name it. I'm quoting now. It's exactly what he did. He said, it's Origin of Species. Oh my God, I can't remember the rest of the line he said. The ultimate evidence of an omnipotent God is that even somebody who doesn't believe in him has to call upon him to remind him of the name of the book, which caused him to disbelieve in him. You know. I said to a fellow who stood up in an audience once and said to me, you know, science is everything. I said, you really don't believe that? He said, yes, I do. I said, tell me, should a scientist be honest about his or her findings in the lab? Should they report it honestly? He knew he was walking into a trap. Because if he commented on it, it was a metaphysical statement, not a scientific statement, and all of a sudden science wouldn't be everything. There was metaphysics to it also. I want to read for you. It'll take me a minute to do it, but it's worth this. And that is David Berlinski, the agnostic, who had a brilliant book called The Devil's Delusion in response to Dawkins as the God Delusion. And in the flap, here's an agnostic responding to Dawkins and the other. In the flap jacket of that book, here's what he says. Has anyone provided a proof of God's inexistence? Not even close. Has quantum cosmology explained the emergence of the universe or why it is here? Not even close. Have the sciences explained why our universe seems to be finely tuned to allow for the existence of life? Not even close. Are physicists and biologists willing to believe in anything so long as it is not religious thought? Close enough. Has rationalism and moral thought provided us with an understanding of what is good, what is right, and what is moral? Not close enough. Has secularism in the terrible 20th century been a force for good? Not even close to being close. Is there a narrow and oppressive orthodoxy of thought and opinion within the sciences? Close enough. Does anything in the sciences or in their philosophy justify the claim that religious belief is irrational? Not even in the ballpark. Is scientific atheism a frivolous exercise in intellectual contempt? Dead on. You know, Dennis quoted God and the Astronomers by Jastrow. He has a brilliant line in that. I know Dennis must know it too. It's so popular. He said, for those of us who've lived by our faith in the sciences, I'm afraid this whole thing is going to end up like a bad dream. We're going to scale the mountains of knowledge and climb higher and higher and higher. And when we reach the top, we'll be greeted by a band of theologians who've been sitting there for centuries. That's right. Yeah, maybe we'll take two more. One, it's two more.
Yeah. You know, in layman's terms, a couple of weeks ago, I heard somebody say that the world wants you to pick between religion and science, and that the two really weren't opposed to each other, that true science is the explanation of how God did it. And I thought, I like that. Yep. All right, we have to wrap up at 9, so this may be the last question. I don't want to put a load of pressure on you there, but it better be a good one. What's your name?
Dean.
Dean, and your question.
Yeah, could I just say a couple things first? Dennis, I'm really ashamed to say that I've never heard of you before this event. You're a pleasure. Jeff, your definition of redneck is a glorious absence of sophistication, right? Correct. You asked some very sophisticated sounding questions.
I apologize.
And Ravi, your ministry has been a tremendous blessing to me over the past year or so, and thank you for that. I want to echo Pilate's question to Jesus, only I'll stay for your answer. What is truth?
What is truth? Mm-hmm. You know, Natan Sharansky, the Ministry of Industry and Trade from Israel, who was put into solitary for a long time, went back to the former Soviet Union, and he asked if he could go into the prison where he'd been kept in solitary Lefortovo prison for some time, and his wife was with him. He asked her to please stay out. He wanted to go in for a moment by himself. He was a brilliant man. I'm sure you know him better than I would, even Dennis. He used to be an interpreter for Andrei Sakharov and so on. Sharansky went in by himself and came out and then asked if he could go and lay a wreath at the grave of Andrei Sakharov, the physicist who gave to the Soviets the atomic bomb. And after he laid the wreath, he looked at the media and he said, Sakharov made this statement. He always thought that the most powerful weapon in the world was the bomb. Sakharov said in his latter years, he changed his mind. The most powerful weapon in the world, he said, is not the bomb, it is the truth. In fact, Churchill said truth is the most valuable thing in the world. It is so valuable that often it is hidden by a bodyguard of lies. And he was talking about military intelligence. Pilate is the quintessential example of modern times. He asked the most profound question he could have asked, what is truth? And did not wait for the answer. Truth, simply stated, is a propositional description of that which describes reality as it actually is. Truth has two components to it. Correspondence, where particular questions, when responded to, have to correspond to reality as it is. And secondly, when all of your answers are given, they have to be coherent. And so when you go into a court of law, a lawyer asks you specific questions to test you for correspondence to reality. When all of your answers are put together, they have to cohere in a cohesive form and not have a systemic or a particular contradiction. So the question of truth is propositionally that which corresponds to reality, and in putting them all together, it is a coherent set of answers. When you take those two tests, then you go to logical consistency, empirical adequacy, experiential relevance. The 2 and the 3 have to deal with 4 questions of life: origin, meaning, morality, and destiny. You answer the questions correspondingly true and coherent at the end. And of course, as a follower of Christ, I believe he embodied that in the questions that were answered in origin, meaning, morality, and destiny. Truth in a philosophical classroom ought to be defined as that which corresponds to reality as it actually is. That's the simple definition I can give to you. Thank you.
First, I want to say it's okay you never heard of me. You should all know this, because those of you who know somebody who's in public life think everybody knows the person. But we know better. It's like little kids will come over to me and say, "Are you famous?" And I go, "Yes, among those who know me." And that's the truth. Talking about truth, that is the truth. The times that I'm thrilled that somebody knows me is really, they're very, very unsophisticated moments. Like yesterday, I was in Denver because I had a wonderful talk at a huge church in Denver. Christians United for Israel had a beautiful evening, and I called a local cigar shop because if I have any chance, I go to a cigar place and relax with a cigar before I have my lecture and after I do my show. And there's this little window of hours. And so I go, do you have a place where I could sit and smoke, sir? He goes, "You sound like Dennis Prager." And I want you to know that the guy at the Denver cigar store knew me, made my day. That I can't tell you how. So it's a very funny thing about who knows you and who doesn't know you and so on. But by the way, that is one of the beauties of this evening. Those who came only knowing this remarkable man, I hope that you will listen to my show or read my books or or visit Prager University, my big endeavor right now to undo the damage of the university 5 minutes at a time. That's what we're doing. That is what we're doing. It's very sophisticated. Check it out, prageruniversity.com. But I want to answer the true thing, and it's a good one to end on, I guess. I feel bad because I know there's so many more with questions. It's always like that. But I guess it's better that you want more than you think, God, did this go on long? So, right? Between the two, it's a better option. But I just want to tell you something about this, about truth, how important it is. I believe truth is the most important. I say this on the air all the time. Truth is the most important macro value. It's not the most important micro value. There are many important. Micro means personal life. Macro is social life. Truth is not as important micro. It's very important, but not as. You don't want to tell the whole truth, perhaps, to your child. The truth is you are ugly. Right? No. I'm being funny, but I'm telling you the truth. In the family, in the personal realm, we do embellish truth a little bit for the sake of the feelings of the people we talk to. All right, so that's an important thing. And is every sin you commit important to tell your spouse? These are great questions that are answered better in the therapeutic realm than in necessarily another realm. But in the macro, truth is the most important value, and I will tell you exactly why. Because lies built Auschwitz. That's why. Without lies about Jews, there could not have been a Holocaust. Without lies about blacks, there could not have been the slave trade. Lies are the root of evil more than any other of the sins that we commit. Because people who believe lies don't know they're doing evil. That's why it's so terrible. You could then enslave a black and think, I'm not doing evil because this is not really a human. You could put a Jew in a gas chamber because they're really vermin. You can, and any of the genocides, or they're just based on lies. Mao's and Stalin's and Hitler's and so many others. So truth, the world rests on truth. In Hebrew, the word for truth is emet. And it's a fascinating word, and it's why I believe that biblical Hebrew has divine origin in some way. Because Hebrew words are fascinating in and of themselves. The word for truth is the first letter, the middle letter, and the last letter of the Hebrew alphabet. Aleph, Mem, and Taf. The word for lie is the second to last letter, the third to last letter, and the fourth to last letter. It can't be a coincidence. It can't be. It's a language that's built in meaning that it is utterly, utterly fascinating. So I believe that, and I'll give you another example. Christians are lied about in America all the time. And it drives me out of my mind. And being a Jew, I can defend you better. That's just the way it works. Christians can do more for Jews than Jews do, and Jews can do more for Christians than Christians do. So I'll tell you a cute story, because there's always the unspoken issue of a Jew and what does he believe and so on. But I'll tell you this, and it's adorable, and don't take it as gospel. But I won't name the name. But I am blessed to work for the Salem Radio Network. They syndicate my show. They syndicate my wonderful colleagues' shows. And as I said, I'm on here noon to 3, and my colleagues are on the rest of the day on WGKA at 9:20 a.m. I'm on from noon to 3. So it was a very interesting thing. And all the people who run Salem are evangelical Christians. So this is a Jew working for evangelical Christians. To give you an idea, by the way, just you should know, evangelical Christians, in my experience, are so more open than secular liberals. They live in a hermetically sealed world that they accuse you of living in. They do. They won't hear somebody else. So anyway, so here we are, and it was I was on Salem Radio has a plane that they use periodically for very important lectures to send people around and so on. So I was on it with some of the heads of the company, and they were talking to me theology and so on. And finally, one of them said, he said, "Dennis, look, of course we'd love you to come to Christ. We'd love you to be a Christian. But the truth is, you do much more good for us as a Jew." Thank you very much.
Closing statements. He goes first.
He goes first. Unfortunately, I thank the people for their questions. We don't have time for any more questions. It is now time for closing remarks. Dennis, would you like to go first?
Well, sure. I'll be very brief because I know we're long. First of all, apology to all those who had questions. I always feel bad. I am one talk show host. Every time the hour ends, there's a whole list of callers. And I see on occasion, because in the name, after the name is the amount of time they've been holding on. And I will sometimes see, 1 hour, 27 minutes, 11 seconds. And I'm thinking, oh, I feel terrible. This guy's waiting for me so long. And I got to. So I always have this bad feeling. But it's not possible, obviously. People, thank God, want to ask questions. And so an apology to those who we didn't have time for. I won't say much. What I have had to say, I have said. And I will just end by telling you, really repeating to you, A, what an honor it is for me to be here at this remarkable church with this remarkable man. How much you give me strength. That's the thing I want to leave you with. You're good for me. I hope I'm good for you, but you need to know how good you are for me. Because you talk about lonely battles. These four guys, I mean, I feel for them. What it is to hold these values in American political life today, the mockery and the hatred that you receive, and it's always one way, the mockery and the hatred. That's the irony. You're called haters, but I live with you. I never hear this hate. I don't know what Christians they're talking about. I don't say they don't exist. There are asinine Christians, asinine Jews, asinine Buddhists, everything. I know that. But my experience with enormous numbers of Christians has been so utterly positive. The kindness and everything, and the humility. I mean, I'm not going to paint you as saints. You're not saints. No, there's no saint walking like around. But there's so many good people. And it's fashioned by your faith, and that's powerful. And it does good for me. I need to see people of faith as good. Because when I see people of faith as bad, I told you the effect is horrible. When people do bad and they're considered religious, it's like then you throw up your hands. It's over. The game is over. If they're going to be bad. So know the good that you do. Know that the power that you wield in the goodness that you do as an American, as a Christian, it's a beautiful thing. I love it. It's encouraging. So you need to know this, because you don't get this feedback much. You may get it from fellow Christians, so here I am to tell you, who is your brother, if you will, your religious brother, your theological brother, the Jew, to tell you how wonderful. I often say, and I mean it, I speak 2 languages fluently, Christian and Jewish. And I mean it, it's true. In the same week, I'll speak at a church and I'll speak at a synagogue, and it's I know the language of the groups. I knew I had really made it when I was asked by a group of evangelicals to lead the opening grace, and I did it well. Among Jews, I could do the proper one in Hebrew. So I see this. By the way, there's a talk I give that is one of my favorite, is what Jews and Christians can learn from each other. And it's on tape. You can get it through my website. You will love it. It is hilarious and true. And I'm tempted to give you one example, but I won't. All right, I will. Okay. So here, you'll really love this. So here is a test that I would love to see done, a sociological test. 100 Jews randomly picked, 100 Catholics, and 100 Protestants, okay? And they are told in advance, you're going to a hotel to have an interfaith lunch, just to get to meet each other. So that's it. So I then arranged with the hotel to serve overly ripe cantaloupe. Which group will complain the most? Every human in America knows the answer. Jews. It's not even a question. The only possible question is between the Catholics and the Protestants. So here is the question: why? See, since I was a child, I always want to know why. Why will the Jews complain more about overly ripe cantaloupe than Christians? So I came up with a number of possible theories, all right? One is a joke. You don't serve bad cantaloupe to the chosen people. That's a joke, okay? That's a joke. It's not true, because half the Jews can't stand the title. They don't want it. Like Tevye in Fiddler on the Roof, they would like God to choose somebody else for a change. So that's not the reason. So I have, and this is my serious reason. Jews and Christians see suffering differently. And by the way, I'm taking no side, but I'm telling you how interesting it is to be immersed in both cultures. For a Christian, suffering is in effect imitating Christ. There is a nobility and even a certain beauty in it, and certainly acceptance. For Jews, suffering stinks. Thank you very much.
I should have gone first. Love you too, Dennis. Thank you. Thank you. I just want to add one little link to a previous question, and then my closing comment will be very brief. We are looking for hope. We are looking for promise. And Jeff, when you raised that question, I resisted at that moment, because I was born and raised in India. I had a tough childhood. In fact, my father always told me I would never make it. Yeah, I've told the story in Walking from East to West. And one day he looked me in the eye and he said, "You're going to bring such shame on our family," because a culture of shame when things don't go well. My dad never realized then what God had in mind. And at the age of 17, on a hospital bed, having attempted to take my own life, when the Bible was brought to me, and I saw the words of Christ, "Because I live, you also shall live." A simple prayer to make him the shepherd of my life and to follow after God and his word. Nobody in my family, nobody in my friendship circles, not even myself, ever dreamed of the hope and the possibility that would bring. And so I just say to you, a life transformed, a life redeemed, a life in whom God pours his miraculous work is all that it sometimes takes to change even a small group of people. Someday someone might emerge on the scene who could be a world changer. And that is my prayer, not because of the person, but because God is able and God is all-powerful, and we trust him for that. There's a great Hebrew parable which basically tells you this: God is like the light, prosperity is like the shadow. If you turn towards the light and walk towards the light, the shadow will follow you. Walking towards God, prosperity, the blessing follows. You turn your back upon the light and try to chase your shadow, you will never catch up with it. And that's the choice before us. Either we walk towards God and let the blessing follow, we turn away our backs upon God and we find all the discord and the pain and the suffering and the evil. I love the way Dennis portrayed it, the cost of a lie. The first time I heard of Dennis Prager was when he was debating Jonathan Glover. And after that, Dennis, I quoted you all over the globe because you really stumped him with a comment. He was, again, railing against religion and railing against Christianity and all of that. Dennis said this to him. He said, Jonathan, if you come to Los Angeles and you're driving through a dark street at night and your car breaks down and you're all alone and you go up to the front of the car and you're wondering what's happening and you hear footsteps coming behind you and you turn and you see four big, burly guys walking towards you. Would it or would it not make a difference to you if you found out they were just coming out from a Bible study? So if this evening does anything, why don't we all look for a good Bible study and make a difference in this world? A Bible study where God's word is honored, and that's when we become world changers. I'm honored to be with you, and I don't think it'd be fair for us to end without giving Jeff a moment to say a few words too. I just want to thank you, Jeff. God bless you. I want to thank Randy Pope, the senior pastor, for making this great facility available to us. What a great kindness he's done. And both of the staff members, and Dennis, you gave me a great honor by asking me to come and be part of this evening. God bless you. And thank you, Jeff. Thank you. God bless you. God bless you, my brother. God be with you. Yeah. Thank you.
Dennis and Ravi will be in the lobby signing books if you are interested. Yeah, you know, I have to say this. When I agreed to do this, I had no idea there would be this many young people here. And it's such an encouragement to me. And I saw a thing a few weeks ago when we were growing up. You know what the number one fear that we had was? It was public speaking. When they surveyed people, it was public speaking. And I saw something the other day that said the number one fear of this generation is living a life without meaning.
That's great.
So the fact that you're here, there's your meaning. Love truth. Embrace it and cling to it. Because it's the only thing that makes this short time here worthwhile. Thank you for coming tonight. God bless you.